Growing up in a cult complicates everything. The truth matters. The truth sets us free. You're listening to Out of the Shadows with Mary Murphy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 2. Currently waiting for the sentence to be passed by Judge Brooks in Fayetteville, Arkansas. While we're waiting, I thought we'd dive back in and talk about some more letters submitted to Judge Brooks prior to this sentencing hearing. The first letter that we're going to talk about is from Nicole Burres. I've not seen as many comments regarding this letter. It's dated March 3rd, 2022, addressed to the Honorable Timothy L. Brooks with the address at the United States District Court in Fayetteville, Arkansas. It also provides her name and address. And then Nicole writes, Dear Judge Brooks, I understand that you have a sentence to adjudicate for Joshua Duggar, and I wanted to write to you to share my family's personal interactions with the defendant, in hopes that you may show mercy in your sentencing. I want to share with you what I see about Joshua's attitude of serving others, the children he has raised, and his impact in ministry despite hardships. We are neighbors of the Duggar family, and our back goat pasture adjoins their cow field. In our little town, the entire Duggar family is well known for being service-focused. Though they don't brag about their service, we often see that after a national disaster, the Duggar family, including Joshua, quietly step in to help those in need. When there was a tornado in Joplin, Missouri, Joshua went to help out. He has traveled internationally to serve poor and needy communities. However, his service isn't limited to tornadoes in third world countries. He quietly helps families and individuals in our community in a myriad of ways. My husband, a financial advisor, was counseling an older widow around 3 years ago regarding her financial situation. During that private meeting, he learned that Joshua Duggar was sending this widow a regular and large sum of money to help with her and her son's monthly expenses. He had known their story and felt compassion for them. When someone needs assistance, Joshua and his wife sacrificially step in to meet the need. I have met people to whom he has given cars in an effort to assist them financially. I have heard people gratefully share this information, though Josh himself would never boast about it or share the information at risk of embarrassing anyone. If you were to attend a Duggar family get-together, you would not pass through the home without Joshua introducing himself, learning your story, and humbly attempting to help you with whatever your situation requires. If you were to step through the doors, you would often find him expertly playing hymns on the piano if the room is empty, or connecting with people if the room is crowded. He would then be the first to jovially greet you with a big howdy. He would come over to talk and ask questions to get to know you better. He attentively listens to people's hurts and struggles and attempts to resolve them. When he is unable to meet a need, Joshua is the great connector. He listens to people intently and then seeks to introduce them to the one person who can best care for them. We have seen this countless times and have witnessed his service on more than one occasion. When I was pregnant in early 2020, I contracted COVID and began early contractions. I visited a local hospital where the masked doctors stood at considerable distance or gazed at me through thick glass before sending me home with instructions to pick up anti-diarrheal medicine to stay hydrated and keep the contractions at bay. The only challenge, in the early pandemic days, all pharmacies and grocery stores were closed by the time I was discharged, and I was unable to purchase any over-the-counter medication. By 2 a.m., my contractions were 1 minute apart and intense. I needed medication and knew that the hospital was offering me little assistance. Despite the unreasonable hour, my husband called Joshua Duggar and asked if he had any anti-diarrheal medication to assist me. After searching his medicine cabinets top to bottom, Joshua found the medicine and then offered to drive it over to our home in the dark hours of the morning. Before 3 a.m., Joshua had willingly risked exposing himself to a pandemic disease that everyone feared and that I was miserably suffering from. Even though my gown-donned doctor stared at me from behind a door, Joshua drove to my door to compassionately hand over medicine to ease my dehydration and end my contractions. My baby was safely born at term because Joshua stepped in that night during a most humiliating moment and did it without a second thought. As a former pediatric nurse, I've had exposure to thousands upon thousands of children, and I've learned that you can tell a lot about a man by the children he has raised. I've seen children who are abused, who have cruel parents. I have seen children who are insecure, who have critical parents. I have seen children who act out, who have absent parents. I have the unique opportunity to see Joshua and Anna's children up close, as they are my children's closest and favorite friends. What I evaluate in the Duggar children as a former pediatric nurse, what I witness in these children as a mother of 8 children myself, is remarkable. They are the most cheerful, funny, delightful, respectful, bouncy, well-behaved, thoughtful, adventurous, and inquisitive children I have encountered. They don't just speak respectfully in my presence. My children report how they are honorable and private when they are all playing in the pasture. They are the type of children who ask permission before staying for dinner, and then compliment the vegetable meal they may not prefer, to consider the needs of others. They tell clean and hilarious jokes and stories. They are active and creative and often tell about what they saw or did with their dad that taught them something new about the world. As a nurse, as a mother, I see that this reflects on Joshua. Kids don't typically and naturally grow into amazing, productive members of society unless they are cultivated, nurtured, educated, lovingly discipled, and adored. Joshua has been integral in that process with his children, and his children are a testimony to his character as a man and as a daddy. Joshua was a tremendously involved father who usually had a child at his side while he worked. If he was driving a big construction truck by our land, he'd honk and wave with an older son proudly waving along behind a seatbelt. If you stopped by the car lot to say hi, Joshua would have his 2 little daughters and his wife spending time with him, just for fun. He was a man who chose to be involved in his children's lives, even during work hours, even when it made life more difficult, even when it wasn't convenient. Though we live in a culture where daddies are distant and distracted with personal pursuits, Joshua's life pursuit has been raising a delightful family, and he has been diligent to raise extraordinary children. Those children are deeply grieved by his absence, and I beg you, I urge you, to give those children the hope that they will see their daddy soon. Finally, I want to speak to you about Joshua's relationship with his Savior, Jesus, and how that is even displayed during his life in prison. We have maintained contact with Joshua and Anna during this difficult time in their lives. When Joshua was first put into jail, he shared a room with a man who had destroyed his life and needed hope. Joshua shared with him the good news about Jesus' death for him and told him about becoming a Christian, a new creation. The man was converted and his life dramatically changed. When he was released from jail, his wife commented that she had been praying for him for years and was amazed to see what a completely different man he was because of what Joshua shared. His alcoholism ceased. He became involved in church. He had peace. That man passed from COVID just 6 weeks afterward, but his family was left with the knowledge that they will see him again one day in heaven, and that is because of Joshua. I ran into Anna at church the other day. She was accompanied by a young woman with 2 sweet little children, one infant in a car seat and one at her side. I asked if she had a spouse with her. Her husband was in jail. Joshua had been speaking with her imprisoned husband that week, and he had connected this woman with Anna and our church, even from his jail cell. Joshua continues to be engaged in ministry to others even while locked up, even when everything has been taken away. I understand that none of that religious information may mean anything to you, and that's all right. I'm not asking you to understand what a relationship with Jesus looks like, but I do ask you to look at the character of this man. Even when he is at his most horrific time in life, he is reaching out to others to serve them. He is a cheerful and encouraging presence to all those around him. In fact, I was at Anna's house on a Saturday night a few weeks ago when Joshua called. He devastatingly shared that there was a man who was verbally threatening and abusive to him every time he passed his cell in solitary confinement. Joshua was discouraged and prayerful, but just days later, the man approached him to apologize. This hardened criminal stated that he and the other men knew that Joshua was innocent. As inmates, they recognized that sometimes innocent men are in prison, and they were so stunned by Joshua's character that they were convinced of his innocence. You do not need to be convinced of his innocence. I know that decision has been made, and I only humbly implore you to consider the life and character of this man. Consider Joshua's service to others. Consider the type of children he has been raising and how that reflects upon him. And consider his impact in ministry even when enduring the situation. Most people don't have that type of character even without undergoing the most massive stressor of their lives, yet Joshua Duggar has. He and his family are not typical of what the world has to offer. They are better. Please allow Joshua the joy of continuing in ministry to his family and our community as you consider the duration of his sentence. With utmost gratitude, Nicole Burres. I have a few thoughts I want to share. First, wow. I tried to emphasize as I was reading the letter the words where Nicole used italics. Frankly, I feel the use of italics in her letter is very disrespectful to Judge Brooks. It's very condescending, and from the cultural viewpoint, while some of this verbiage may seem benign, it's laced with meaning in the cult. So I just want to touch on a few of those. Quote, "We have maintained contact with Joshua and Anna during this difficult time in their lives." End quote. Saying that this is a difficult time in their lives implies that Joshua and Anna are being persecuted and that they're suffering for Jesus. I think it also diminishes the severity of the crimes and the seriousness about child sex abuse material for which Joshua has been convicted in a court of law, where he was presumed innocent until proven guilty. The next one I want to mention is when she talks about Anna with the young woman and 2 children at church. And Nicole's first question that she says, quote, "I asked if she had a spouse with her," end quote. So this reflects as well on females need to be under the authority of a male, and females who show up with children at church services or other gatherings without a male, or it becomes known that they're single, a single parent, or divorced or separated. I personally experienced this myself, that where I showed up and this wasn't even a cult church service or one church. I was treated differently. My child was treated differently because I wasn't wearing a ring, because I was separated. I was looked at as a danger. Anyway, lots of stories there to tell. We'll have to talk about that another time. So for Nicole to ask this young woman with her 2 children first if she had a spouse with her, it's just laced with that data mining of, are you a dangerous woman? Are you a strange woman? And more on that. We'll talk about that more sometime. Next, I want to say when Nicole wrote, quote, "I'm not asking you to understand what a relationship with Jesus looks like, but I do ask you to look at the character of this man," end quote. And the 2 words I emphasized, Nicole wrote in italics. And this is, first of all, I think you're not being a very good testimony to talk condescendingly to the judge regarding a relationship with Jesus, really? And talking about the character of Josh, the focus on character stems from the cult. Character was the focus. Character, the founder of the cult, taught and and believed that a college education was not necessary, that it was more important to have good character, that employers cared about character more than education. That's why she and the others are focusing on character. It's very work-based. Although they would never say it was work-based, it really is in practice. In practice, it's a very work-based cult as far as doing good works to earn favor, even though everyone would say no, that's not right. But however, those who have survived and escaped the cult have stories, and I have stories about the pressure to perform, to keep up the facade, to look perfect, to have that ministry smile, to show the world this new way of life. Okay, moving on. Nicole writes, quote, "You do not need to be convinced of his innocence. And I know that decision has been made," end quote. I feel like this is another slam. Obviously, she's implying that Josh is innocent, and it's a little slam at the justice system. And next, Nicole writes, "He and his family are not typical of what this world has to offer. They are better," end quote. That statement sums up the essence of the cult. The cult teaches that if you follow its teachings, if you practice, if you live out what the cult expects of you, that you will be better than the world, that the world will see that you're better, that you are at this higher level than everyone else. And it's sad. The arrogance in this letter is alarming, and also Nicole throws in that she's a former pediatric nurse, trying to use that she does have a college education. So I've actually personally met Nicole. I met her 2 years ago when we were both at a mutual friend's bridal shower or wedding shower, and she had very recently had this baby that she talks about, and she was not super friendly. She was actually quite cold to me, and I just passed it off as she has a new baby, she has a bunch of kids, she's tired, whatever. I don't take a lot of things personally, so I just let it roll off my back. And then when I read this letter from her defending Josh and advocating for him, just typical of the cold shoulder and the shunning that goes on in the cult, especially to those perceived as a danger, because we've left, we have started speaking out. Truth tellers are not welcome. That's fine, no worries. I am so happy to be free and out. I am so grateful. Nicole's husband apparently is a financial counselor, and Nicole relates how her husband met with an older widow in a confidential meeting. Then Nicole discloses that Josh was giving this older widow money, apparently. However, Nicole, as a former pediatric nurse, knows about confidentiality, and to disclose this kind of information is not her place to do, especially with the letters being leaked, which also, in my opinion, by the attorneys for Josh Duggar, that was definitely on purpose. So moving on, Nicole writes that Josh would have his 2 little daughters and his wife spending time with him. And the way in which she phrases this is very telling. It doesn't say Anna and the 2 daughters would stop by to spend time with Josh. It says Josh would have his 2 little daughters and his wife. It doesn't even mention Anna's name. This demonstrates the females as property, also Josh's coercive control of Anna and the daughters, that it's his decision that they are at the car lot spending time with him. 2 other sentences that Nicole writes, quote, "Even when everything has been taken away," end quote, and also the most horrific time in his life, And both of these comments by Nicole, referring to Josh being in jail and ministering, these both refer back to what I mentioned earlier, that they believe that Josh is being persecuted in the name of Jesus, and that's why he's in jail. My final comment about Nicole's letter, at least for now, centers on the focus on how the children reflect on what a great dad that Josh is. This idea stems from the principle of authority in part. We'll talk about it more. The purpose of the children is to make their father successful, i.e., keep the facade firmly in place, to present this unified front, this image of perfection, everyone's smiling, there's the ministry smile again, and the pressure is absolutely terrible on children. Thanks so much for listening. Comment, like, subscribe, and follow me on Instagram at Out of the Shadows with Mary Murphy. No spaces at all in between those words. Also check out my new website, marymurphypodcast.com. I will see you soon. Thanks for listening. Ciao.